Ladies and gentlemen, our referee has called a stop to this contest, declaring the winner by knockout and new MMA show!
Welcome to another round of new MMA show. It is just me. I am not your host, Michael Hansen, nor am I Omar Artola. They are not here. Omar had a bit of a scheduling conflict this week that we couldn't really work our way around. Mike is sick, so for the first time in 132 episodes of this show, we have had to hit you guys with a one-man show. So yeah, it's just going to be me and you guys. I know you'll probably miss the takes from the boys, but we'll try to give you some good stuff here. I do have their picks when we get to the preview portion of things here. I can at least tell you who they're picking in the fights. I think Mike even sent like a little one-sentence blurb on his picks, so I'll share those with you guys. But otherwise, it's just going to be me and you for a little bit here. It's going to be a bit quicker of a show. I think I'm just going to recap the main card from this past weekend and not go through everything, since it was like 14 fights long and wasn't exactly the biggest card in the world. That way you're just not listening to my lone voice going on and on here about these fights. Obviously, we usually have the three of us to break this up. So I think that's going to be the plan. We'll go through the six main card fights, and then we will get you to the previews for the big card this weekend. So that's what we're going to do. It feels weird doing a one-man show. I'm not going to lie. It already feels like I'm not really doing this, and I could just like pause shit and like there's no one here with me. So it's an adjustment to just recording alone. But yeah, we'll see how this goes here. The usual that Mike would say: if you are listening, please drop us a like, subscribe. Subscribing is enormous for us. We really appreciate that. Leave a comment on any of my takes, of course, especially when we get to the previews. You know, if you have something you like this weekend, if you disagree with something I say, if you have a bet you like, it could be a prop bet, it could be a parlay that you're putting together that you think has value, anything like that. Let us know. We would love to hear it, love to talk about it in the comments and get back to you guys. So drop anything like that for us. Follow us on the socials, of course, Instagram, Twitter. We were a little lax there over the holidays, but we're trying to get that ramped back up. Both of those are at @new MMA show. And yeah, I guess that's it. Let's dive into it. Let's make sure the old camera's in the right spot here. All right. So this week on the marquee, we have Jack the Joker Hermansson returning from some time off to get a very big win to kind of stake his claim as a continued contender in this division as he turns back Joe Pyfer, who, you know, you all saw it. He had the hype behind him. He had the UFC machine, if you will, a little bit looking at him like he could be a next guy here. And I think a lot of people, I mean, us included in a way, considering all three of us picked Joe Pyfer last week, I think a lot of people were ready to kind of have Joe Pyfer win this fight and move into the rankings and take the next step in his career. And none of that happened. Jack was not about it. So to break down the fight, Joe Pyfer did come out and look exactly how we all thought he would. You know, the size, the athleticism, the speed, the power, all of it was on display through those first two rounds. He was landing on Jack, and he was landing hard. More than once, I was surprised that Jack hadn't been wobbled more than he was. It seemed like he was taking the shots surprisingly well. But once it got past round two, it was a much different fight. And you could tell that that's what Jack was going for by the way he fought the first 7 or 8 minutes of that fight. There were very few risks coming from him. He was really just trying to get himself through those rounds. You know, it's a risk for sure to start that way, but he must have been very confident that if he could get through that first round and a half, 2 rounds, that the fight was going to swing heavily his way. And I was a little worried about Pyfer's gas tank. You know, he hasn't been to a round 3 since I think it's 2018. Big power puncher, that frame, obviously. I just figured he'd be okay enough to win one more at some point after being up 2-0. But I was wrong. He couldn't do it. Midway through round 2, I would say Jack started picking up the pace a bit. He started moving forward more. He started landing his leg kicks. And by the end of that round, I think Pyfer was already feeling that leg a little bit. Jack had gotten his timing down by then. And really, from that point on, Joe just couldn't find a way to change things up once Jack kind of got that timing down and decided he would start moving forward a bit. Round 3, Joe was just getting jabbed cleanly over and over. He got hurt to the eye midway through the round. He couldn't see for a bit, and Jack really poured it on for like a 30-second stretch there. And then by round 4, Joe's burst was really just gone. Like he would push. He would get like a minute where he kind of looked like he had earlier in the fight. But for the most part, that burst, that energy, it wasn't there. And his leg was hurt. You could clearly see that. He started looking for takedowns, but they weren't there at all. Credit to Jack, because I think a lot of people, and even rightfully so, had really started to believe in the takedown ability and the grappling of Joe Pyfer. And it wasn't even a factor in this fight because Jack just was not allowing it. He was stuffing everything. And once that was the case, it really just became Jack's fight to dictate on the feet. And then in round 5, obviously, he's the one that took it down and capped everything off with his wrestling. So it was just a fantastic veteran performance from Jack. He did exactly what he had to do in order to counter the natural gifts of Joe Pyfer. And he fought a perfect fight. So props to him. That was a hell of a way for him to come back and jump right back into the mix in this division. And Joe, him losing this fight, this is what I hate that fans do sometimes. Like, people bet on Joe Pyfer and then he loses, and it's like, oh, Joe Pyfer sucks. Joe Pyfer was never good. Like, the skills that everyone was so excited about in Joe Pyfer are still there. They didn't go anywhere. You saw him through 10 minutes of this fight. It's just that he had his first 5-round fight against a true veteran who had a great game plan, who was able to take what Joe Pyfer brought and put a pace on him and find a way to, like I said, to counter the skills that he has. So just because that happened does not mean that Joe is not going to be something in this division. Not like I think the guy's going to be the champion, but he's still got plenty of room to grow. And as I keep saying, he's got a lot of natural gifts. So I'm sure he will take this back, learn from this, and we'll see a better Joe Pyfer going forward. And you've got to think the cardio becomes a real focus for him. So I'm interested to see his next fight for sure, which I guess segues me into our usual deal here, which is that after these recaps, we will offer up some matchups that we would like to see for each fighter going forward. So I'll start with Joe, since I was just kind of ending by talking about him. I'm going to pair him with another guy who just lost on this card, which is Brad Tavares. I think that there's no reason for Joe to take too big of a step back, and I think that Brad is that perfect, kind of similar but slightly lower level veteran test in there. And obviously this wouldn't be in a 3-rounder, so the cardio is going to be less of a factor. But Brad can do a lot of things. Brad's also impossible to take down, and he is a skilled striker who's been in there across from a ton of guys and hung tough. So I think that is a perfect next test for Joe and would mean something if he could get past Brad Tavares. So that's where I'd go with Joe. And for Hermansson, I am going to say the winner of a fight that we're going to talk about a little bit later in this episode, which is a fight that is on this weekend's card, and that is Anthony Hernandez and Roman Kopylov. I think the winner of that fight is going to have themselves in line for a pretty big fight. I think Jack, as much as he got a good win here, he hasn't necessarily earned something again with like one of these, upper echelon at middleweight, of which there is quite a few right now. And I think Jack is kind of a rung below that. So I think he's got to get one more for that type of fight. And I think the winner of Hernandez and Kopylov would be exactly that, especially if it's Hernandez. Jack and Hernandez would be a really interesting fight. So that is where I'll go. All right, let's move into the co-main. So like I was saying to you guys in the beginning of this, I'm going to go through the 6 main card fights, but I'm gonna focus on the 4 that I feel like were a bigger deal, and I'll match those up, and then I'll save the other 2 and just kind of do those quickly at the end, almost lightning round style like we usually do. I don't know what's up with my camera tonight. I feel like it's usually a bit higher, but Oh, well, that's life when you're doing a one-man show. All right, so co-main, big result, of course. Dan Ige, round 1 knockout of Andre Fili. It does feel like we were robbed of a potentially memorable scrap here. It was shaping up nicely. But Dan Ige didn't care. He got the job done, and he did it in absolute style. Fili was almost daring him to step in. He was waiting to step back and counter, and it was working well enough for a bit. But Ige closed the distance too quick on the last one, and Fili's chin was still right there in range for that right hand, and he ate it. And that is a pretty big statement for Dan Ige, man. He's a guy who continually gets brought up as a potential stepping stone. Excuse me while I stop dying. Thank you. Continually gets brought up as a potential stepping stone, or at least I'll say a gatekeeper of the rankings at 145. The UFC does it, and we do it too. A guy's working his way up, looking good, and we're saying, let's see if he can get past the Dan Ige. He's just, that's kind of where he is. He's almost becoming Neal Magny-ish at featherweight. And this one, late notice for Fili or not, was really a statement from Dan Ige of his continued status as a ranked level fighter in this division, and not a guy that seems to be going away anytime soon. To put Fili down like that and make it 3 wins in his last 4, that's pretty nice work from Dan Ige. So you got to give him credit. To segue into the matchups for this one, if you listen to this show regularly, you probably know what I'm going to say, because I bring this up for Dan Ige anytime that it seems to make sense. And this is another time that it does make sense, which is a rematch with Edson Barbosa. I have always wanted them to have a rematch. I thought the first fight was extremely close. I didn't love that it went Ige's way. It's still, to date, his best win at 145. A lot of his ranking, I think, kind of comes from that. And I would like to see it run back, either to have Dan Ige prove it and further prove his legitimacy as a contender at 145, or for Edson to get that W back. And I think it's still has the potential to be a great scrap. So I go there. If it doesn't work, I'll give you another idea, which is Diego Lopes. If he can get past Sadiq Youssef, I think that's a great fight as well. And then on the other side of this, for Andre Fili, I don't want to penalize him here. He had looked really solid in his last fight. He took this fight on late notice, saved the co-main event. So I'm going to give him a fight against at least somewhat similar level. And a guy he's never fought before, which I think is actually a really interesting fight, and that is Alex Caceres. I think the two of them, Caceres also coming off a loss, I think the two of them could be a very interesting matchup. So that's where I will go for Andre, the man who likes big booty Latinas, if you saw that press conference after his last fight. All right, so we'll do 2 more, full breakdown style. The next one that I'm going to do here is Gregory Rodrigues, the man that we affectionately refer to on this show as Hobocop. He got himself a round 3 TKO of Brad Tavares. This was a great scrap for as long as it lasted. Gregory Rodrigues came out like a man on a mission. He was walking Brad down, throwing absolute heat, and Brad was with it, man. He was in there to scrap, but he just doesn't carry the same type of artillery that Gregory Rodrigues does. He was finding ways to give Rodrigues problems for sure. His hands were faster. He was mixing in the leg kicks. He was countering pretty well. But Rodrigues is just a large, powerful, dangerous middleweight who is continually coming at you. And God, the barrage that he put on Tavares at the end was just nasty. It looked like he was hitting Tavares with bats, and Tavares didn't even go down. But man, he was rocked for sure. It was absolutely a good stoppage, and even got a takedown on Brad at one point, which no one does. So check that box for him too. But yeah, it was just the physicality and pressure and power. The difference in power in the shots was too much for Brad. As much as he was hanging shot for a little bit, it was just too much, and Rodrigues, overcame him as the fight went on and got a huge win. That's 4 finishes now in his last 5 fights. So he is due for a pretty significant opponent, I would say here. Next time out, that's a big win. So I'll parlay that right into the matchups. For Tavares, obviously, I already answered for you guys earlier when I was talking about the main event. My answer is Joe Pyfer, which, I guess maybe that feels like a little bit of a reward for Tavares just because Pyfer was in a main event, which was higher on the card than Brad. But really, rankings-wise, they're not in dissimilar spots at all. And Brad has obviously proven more in his career than Pyfer has. So I think it's the right move. They're both coming off a loss. Brad obviously just had that nice win against Weidman, whatever you think that's worth at this point in Chris's career. But Brad did look good. So Brad gets a chance to, turn back an up-and-comer and get himself right back to winning ways. And Pyfer gets a chance to get past a proven veteran. So I like that matchup. And then for Hobocop, as I said, I am giving him the step up. I'm going to go with Roman Dolidze. We were on here last week talking about Roman, saying how he did not look good. And I was saying personally how I didn't expect, even though he's obviously a ranked fighter, how I didn't expect the UFC to give him a ranked fighter next time out. And I was trying to think of guys outside the rankings who could make some sense. I think I threw Aliskerov out there, somebody else. But I like this one. I do. As good as Rodrigues has looked, the fact that he has showed us how dangerous he can be as a striker and as a grappler. We still haven't even fully tapped into the grappling expertise that this man has. Dolidze may be the guy to bring that out of him. I just think that that's a great fight, and I think that Gregory Rodrigues deserves that chance. So, yeah, I'm going Robocop and Dolidze. Okay. Moving to the last of the four bigger deal fights, I think, from this card that I'm going to fully recap. We had Rodolfo Vieira get himself a big win with a first-round submission over Armen Petrosyan. And I say a big win not just because not meaning that Petrosyan is some huge name, because he's not. I mean, he was 3-1 in the UFC. He's been solid. But a big win in that Vieira had some hype on him, years back. Obviously, he took that loss to Fluffy where he looked really bad, and he kind of hasn't been able to really reignite that hype. And I think he may have gotten that going now with a finish like that, first round. I think he moves himself up the line here, and he's going to probably have an interesting opponent in his next one where he could really, break through to a level that people thought he was going to reach prior. As for the fight, Petrosyan didn't look good, man. He's shown in the past that he can put up more resistance than that to the takedowns and to the grappling. But this one was all Vieira. The first takedown he went for, he got. And then as soon as Petrosyan turned and gave his back, I was like, all right, we're in trouble. And we were, Vieira had a hold of him. He ended up picking him up, slamming him, moved to the mount like clockwork. And thankfully for him, he was able to, I'm sure he was aware of the clock. He's that good that you would think he probably was, but he was able to slowly transition and set up that arm triangle with enough time left in the round to force the tap. And he got it. So, yeah, as I said, that's a really big performance from him. His fifth sub in the UFC, 2 wins in a row. And we'll see now if he can put that run together. As I said, that Fluffy loss some years back was a roadblock, but it seems the momentum is back now. So we will see. And Petrosyan, yeah, as I said, we've seen better from him. That was not the performance he was looking for at all. You wonder if he could have survived that first round, if things could have started to turn his way, because you knew the first round was going to be tough. Absolutely. It always is with Vieira. But he could not. So tough one for him. He goes back to the drawing board. I'll stick with him first. I will use him as a test for Shara Bullet. We've only seen one fight in the UFC from Shara Bullet so far. Obviously, he looked very good. I think Petrosyan is right at that level where he is a proven guy, proven skills. He has a win over a guy like Gregory Rodrigues, who I was just talking about, deserving a ranked fighter. And I think he's a really good test for Shara Bullet, and he's not going to look to take Shara down, which is huge at this point, because obviously the one potential glaring weakness in Shara's game is his takedown defense and wrestling. So this gives him one more fight to continue to work on that, where he gets to be in there against a fellow striker, a guy who's almost certainly not going to look for the takedown in Petrosyan, and still get an interesting test across from him. So that's where I'm going to go for Armen. And for Vieira, as I said, I am moving him up the line, not quite to the rankings, but a guy who's been there before. I'm going to book some Brazil on Brazil violence, and I am going to put him across from Andre Muniz simply because I would love to see the grappling that ensues and see who can get the better of who. I just think that's a fantastic fight. I'm not sure if they're friendly. They certainly don't train at the same camp or anything. So hopefully that is a fight both guys would be down for, because I think that'd be fucking awesome. So that is where I will go there. All right. So before we move into the big card, which I'm sure is what everyone more so wants to hear about, I'll just close out the main card from this past weekend with two quick recaps. The first of which is Ihor Potieria moving down to middleweight with a UD victory over Robert. I actually forget how they were saying it now. Bryczek. Apologies if that is wrong. But he was the debutant in this fight. Potieria was a late notice replacement who stepped in. And Rob came out, throwing some hammers, especially early. You could see why he has the knockouts on his record that he does. But Potieria generally handled him throughout. He used his length. He used his speed. He had a higher work rate. And he kind of just, all that allowed him to stay ahead pretty much that whole fight. And then he hurt him in round 3 and had him in some trouble a couple times. It looked like he might actually get him out of there. But it was a good win. So he's 1-0 as UFC middleweight now. We'll see how this weight class works for him. Excuse me. It's hard doing a one-man show. I don't know how these other guys who have one-man podcasts do it. You never get a break. Your voice is just going. So yeah, what was I saying? So yeah, he's 1-0 as a UFC middleweight. We'll see what kind of run he can put together at the weight class. He did have a bit of a rough stretch up at 205. Obviously, he had the one Shogun win, which is all he really, can claim as good performances from him in the UFC to this point. But it did seem like the weight cut went fine, even on short notice. So I don't know if this was already in the plans for him. And it seemed like being the bigger middleweight did give him some advantages, that he did use that length and maybe additional power. And we'll see what he can make out of this move to 185. And then the one other that I got to touch on, my boy, Michael Johnson. I was very happy to see him get a W. He got the UD victory over Darrius Flowers. And he looked good. It was nice to see him just cleanly win a fight without any tense moments. No, like, oh my God, he's, putting himself in a submission or oh man, he got fucking turned off with a hook or whatever. It was just a fight that he pretty much was in control of the whole time. Flowers didn't look like he had a lot to offer from jump. He fights very calmly, which I guess is a credit to him, but he just wasn't bringing enough toward Johnson to get him thinking too much about, I think, what was coming back at him from Flowers. So he was kind of able to just really mix it up and fight his fight. I loved all the body shots that we saw from him. I always love Michael Johnson's body shots. He's one of the best going to the body. It was nice to see him show off the wrestling and the grappling a bit, which we don't generally see from him. Just a good, well-rounded win from Michael Johnson. So was definitely happy about that. And that does it for the recap of this weekend. As I said, not going to bother going through. There's a million undercard fights from this card. Nothing was terribly important. One-man show. It's a lot of me talking, so we'll spare spending the time on that, and we will get ourselves into UFC 298. Let me give you the details as Mike would. So UFC 298 this Saturday, February 17th on ESPN Plus pay-per-view. It is happening at the Honda Center in Anaheim, California. Main event, obviously, is Alexander Volkanovski defending his featherweight title against Ilia Topuria. And let's get into this thing. So I'm going to take 8 fights as the fights to truly break down here. There's, I believe, 4 others. I think it's a 12-fight card. So of the ones that I'm not going to do, I will highlight that Rinya Nakamura is on this card. He's fighting Carlos Vieira, who you may know if you watched the recent season of Tough. He was eliminated by Brad Katona on that season. But I'm very interested to see Rinya Nakamura again because he has looked like potentially the real deal so far through a couple fights in the UFC. So I'm looking forward to that one. Absolutely. And then from there, we will move on to the 8 that I'm really going to focus on breaking down here for you guys. I'm just checking the bout order quick because it was weird. Yeah, it's still weird. I don't know what it's about. They got Andrea Lee and Miranda Maverick opening the entire card, first fight of the card before like Val Woodburn and other dudes. So I don't know what that fight placement is. So we are going to do, the top 7 fights, but also this fight because this is a significant fight. I don't know why it is down here on this card. Let me move my shit back in the right place so I can tell you the odds and everything. All right, here we go. So as I mentioned, I do have picks for all 8 of these fights that I'm gonna, truly preview here from Omar and from Mike. So I will share those with you guys. I know you're probably missing hearing their takes. Not like they're quite as good as mine, but hey, we give them some credit. All right. So Omar just gave me the picks. Mike gave me little blurbs on most, although not on this one, actually. So straightforward here. Both of these guys are going Miranda Maverick to win a unanimous decision. And the bookies agree. She is a minus 190 betting favorite here. Andrea Lee is plus 150 as the underdog. She, though, will have 3 inches of height and 4 inches of reach on her side. And I am going to roll with her as the underdog. I obviously understand the Miranda Maverick pick. I was pretty torn here myself. I think actually seeing Lee at plus 150 is kind of what pushed me to go the dog way here. I understand the potential that we've seen in Miranda Maverick. At one time, I was very high on her. She's been a little up and down. But I think these odds are off. I think they should be much closer. And I'm going to go with Lee because I don't think there's a huge advantage for Maverick in the grappling because Lee is a pretty solid defensive grappler. And I think Lee's striking is a level above what we've seen from Miranda Maverick. Now, is she improving there? Yes. Could we see another step up from her in this fight? Yes, it's possible. But Lee is one of those fighters to me who seems to not get the credit that she deserves. And I think she can put it on Miranda Maverick a bit here on the feet. And she needs to fight aggressive. Otherwise, this pick is going to look bad. When she fought Macy Barber, she was oddly tentative in the striking, and it hurt her, and she can't have that here. She has to come out and be aggressive with her hands, with her kicks, knees, everything. But if she does that and she lets her strikes go, typical, she's got a nice Muay Thai style, I think it's going to end up being on Miranda to change this fight with the grappling. And I'm just not sure that she can change it enough. Could absolutely end up wrong. Obviously, you see both of the guys picking Maverick by UD. Maybe she can keep Lee grounded. Maybe she can do just fine on the feet. But I'm seeing Lee winning a scrappy UD here. I think she's a girl who seems to maybe lose when you think she should win, when you think she should lose. And something about this fight, I think she's going to be in Maverick's face on the bit. Be in Maverick's face on the feet and give her some real problems. So I'm going to take Andrea Lee to win a scrappy UD in this fight to start things off for us here. Okay, moving up the card now to the second of the, I guess, featured prelims. And that is the heavyweights. We have Marcos Rogerio de Lima and Justin Tafa. Going back to the boys quick, they're in agreement again. Omar's going Tafa by round 2 knockout, and Mike is going Tafa by round 1 knockout. He did give me a little blurb here, Mike. Mike says, something about those Tafa boys. I feel like these kind of heavyweight fights are toss-ups, just a matter of who lands first. I'm rolling with the Samoan power. So there you have it from Mike. Again, funny how this is working out so far through 2 fights. I didn't even look at who they picked as I'm freaking doing this. I am going the other way. So 2 for 2 where I'm disagreeing with the guys. But here, let me give you the odds first. De Lima is minus 145 as the favorite. Tafa's plus 120 as the dog. So pretty close odds. 1 inch of height only for De Lima. And also 1 inch of reach. I was surprised by that. In my mind, Tafa's a small heavyweight, and I was expecting it to be like 3 inches or, something along those lines. But Lima's not too tall either. He's only 6'1", and Tafa's 6 foot. So only a 1 inch height difference. That surprised me, at least. I don't know about you guys. But yeah, this is tricky. Tafa's a fun fighter. He has that Mark Hunt KO artist flair to him a little bit. Obviously, he's a level below what Mark Hunt ever was. But if he catches you clean, it's a problem. And it's tempting to go with him here, especially coming off what we saw in the last one. But as much as Lima's bread and butter is the grappling, we've never really seen him struggle in the striking. Aside from the Derek Lewis flying knee, obviously, in his last fight, he's never been KO'd in the UFC, and he generally manages to hang with most strikers. So obviously that was a bit of a freak occurrence getting caught with the flying knee out of the gate. But all in all, he seems to do okay in the striking against all different, types of strikers. So I kind of want to say he can do that against Tafa also. I don't think Tafa has any incredible technique. It's more just that he'll have a nice setup and catch you clean, and you can't handle the power. So of course that's in play, but I think Lima can do all right. And mainly I think Lima can drag this thing down and find some ground and pound or find a submission, especially as the fight goes on and Tafa starts to tire. I trust Lima's cardio a bit more than I trust Tafa's, especially if we start grappling. I think Tafa's really going to feel it. The age does worry me a bit for Lima because, the fall off, especially in bigger guys, can happen at any time. But I'm going to go with Marcos Rogerio de Lima here. I think, especially after he just, got his friggin' teeth rearranged in his last fight and couldn't eat for however long, standing across from Justin Tafa, if that's me, I'm fucking taking this guy to the ground as soon as I possibly can. So I think that's what's going to be in his mind too, and I think he can press his advantages early. I'm going to take De Lima round 1 sub. It may, part of me is like, why are you doing that when you just said that it's going to become even easier late? And yeah, if it goes late, I think the sub may be there even easier, but I'm going to say he gets it in 1. So I will go De Lima round 1 submission. All right, now we start getting into the meatier fights here. Wild that this one is a prelim because it could be a main event on a fight night easily, which is Amanda Lemos and Mackenzie Dern. Really good fight. Who? Yo, this is gonna be every fucking fight. This is too funny. Wow, I wish they were on here because we ain't agreeing on shit. It would have been some good conversations. Omar is going Mackenzie Dern by round 2 submission, and Mike is going Mackenzie Dern by round 3 submission. Mike says on this fight, he says, this is more of a field pick for me. I just want to see Dern back in the win column. I hate that she's been ping-ponging between wins and losses the last few years, and I sure as hell don't want to see her suffer back-to-back losses for the first time in her professional career. Imagining she feels that way too, she's going to fight with an urgency to get the fight where she needs to, which is the mat, and work to find a sub, which I know she can do against the hard puncher in Lemos. So that's what Mike thinks. 3 for 3. We'll see if we can make it the whole card. I'm going the other way. Odds, Amanda Lemos minus 135. I thought it would be wider. I will say that. So there are a lot of people who have faith in Dern here. Dern is plus 110, so almost even money. The height is the same. Lemos is going to have a 2-inch reach advantage. As filthy as Mackenzie Dern's grappling is, she is going to have to walk through fire in order to get this one to the mat. And I just don't think her striking has developed enough to survive Lemos. Amanda Lemos is a killer on the feet. She throws absolute heat. She pursues in a way that I think is going to give Mackenzie Dern problems. I made this point last time we talked about Mackenzie on here, which is that her striking improvements have not made it past the initial exchanges yet. And what I mean by that is as soon as the first couple strikes in an exchange are thrown, and she's clean through them, through the first couple, if the exchange ends there and, someone steps back, separates, resets the range, she's fine. But any any extended exchanges, that's where her problems come into play. Her footwork starts to get lost. Her defense slips. And that's where I think Amanda Lemos can win this fight, because she is going to blitz and she is going to be relentless. And she's not just looking for 1-2s with a step backwards to reset. She's going to be in there to take Dern out. And I think she's going to get her because of it. Now, she'll have to be careful to not be over aggressive and just walk into a takedown, because Dern is certainly going to be looking for them, and things could change really fast if she does, because I don't love Amanda Lemos' grappling, and she is the type of girl where if Dern does get this thing to the mat, Dern may only need the one time. So we'll see about that. And obviously, always this kind of fight, when you pick it, if you go the other way and then it does play out, one takedown, one sub, you look really bad. But I'll take that risk, because I don't see anything yet from Mackenzie on the feet that makes me think she can survive prolonged exchanges with a killer like Amanda Lemos, and I think that's what she's going to be in. So I am going to go Amanda Lemos by round 2 knockout, and I'm actually going to say that it is a bad one, and that Dern gets put out pretty badly. So that is that. 3 fights down. We move to the main card. All right. Finally, the return of our boy Fluffy. I wish the guys were on here, because I know we all love Anthony Hernandez. All right. Who's the picks here? Omar is going Hernandez by UD. Finally, him and Mike differ. Mike is going Kopylov. Mike says Kopylov by round 2 knockout. As much as I love the well-rounded game Fluffy has developed over the past few years, Roman Kopylov is just too terrifying of a human being at this point. Even though he lost his first 2 UFC fights to Roberson and Duraev, he's on a 4-fight tear, knocking out all 4 in the second round. Fluffy will have his moments in the first, but the power of Kopylov will shine through in the second yet again. All right. So on this one, I got to break the tie. Odds-wise, sort of wide. I know Kopylov is a late replacement. I didn't think it would be this wide, but Hernandez is minus 250 and Kopylov is plus 200. Measurements are identical. Height is the same. Reach is the same. And I'm not surprised the guys are split, because this is a tough one, because I never want to pick against our boy Fluffy, but Roman Kopylov has also looked extremely dialed in lately and has been impressing us quite a bit. He has really managed his reads so incredibly well as these fights have gone on, managed the range in these fights incredibly well. But let's look at who he's beaten on this run of 4 straight KOs. Alessio Di Chirico, Punahele Soriano, Claudio Ribeiro, and Josh Fremd. And if you think back on any of those fights, every single one of those guys went in there to strike with Roman Kopylov. Some tried to blitz him. Some tried to walk him down. Some tried to snipe him. There were different approaches. But they all wanted to strike with him. Anthony Hernandez ain't that. He is in there to pressure you and grab a hold of you and overwhelm you with his pace and with his grappling onslaught. And as long as he doesn't have any issue adjusting to Kopylov's range and timing in the first few minutes of this fight, as they're kind of still cold and settling in, that is where I think he could potentially get caught. But as long as he can get past those opening 2-3 minutes of adapting to the range and how he wants the pressure and all that, I think this is going to dramatically shift into being a fluffy Hernandez fight. As good as Kopylov has been, I don't think his grappling or his cardio are at a point where they can stand up to what Fluffy's going to bring. He is a absolute cardio monster. He beats guys purely with pace. He puts on a pace like you've never seen in your life. If you are not familiar with Anthony Hernandez, please watch this fight. The guy is amazing to watch fight. You leave every fight like, how does he do that? But the pace is incredible. I will say that I worry a little bit about body shots, because Fluffy has been hit to the body before, and Kopylov has some deadly body shots, but I don't know if he's even going to want to throw kicks because of the risk of the takedown, so it may become only hands to the body, which helps a little bit. But either way, I think the style matchup favors Hernandez too much. I am going to go with Anthony Hernandez via drowning and also by a 3rd round submission over a tiring Kopylov. All right. Now we're getting into the real big deal fights. We have Geoff Neal and Ian Gary. I just realized I'm not giving you guys like the records and the backgrounds of the fighters the way Mike would, but oh well, different style here on the One Man Mark show. So yeah, Geoff Neal, Ian Gary, welterweight fight. Let's see the picks. Omar, round 3 TKO for Ian Gary, and Mike, round 3 TKO for Ian Gary. He says Gary gives us another clinic over another talented striker, building his stock significantly. All right, so both of the guys are confident in Ian Gary. Both of them think he gets a finish in this fight. He is the betting favorite. He's minus 240. Geoff Neal's plus 190 on the other side. Excuse me. 4 inches of height for Gary, but a 1-inch reach for Geoff Neal, which is interesting. But not surprising if you know Gary, because his arms are really not terribly long for his frame. This is a great fight. It's one that obviously we were supposed to have before, and it's come back together now. Thankfully, for those of us that enjoyed the idea of this matchup, a little more heat on it now after the back and forth between the two of them last time. And Geoff Neal is absolutely live as the underdog in this fight because Ian Gary can be hit. We've seen it a few times. We've seen him get dropped by why am I blanking? By Kenan Song. And Neal's hand speed and accuracy, and of course power, especially with the left hand, they could be a real problem for Ian Gary. But no matter how much I try to consider the Neal side of this, I can't really get myself to do anything here besides take Ian Gary. I know it's a step up from D-Rod and from this current version of Neil Magny, but I just think Gary's game has evolved to a point where he should be able to handle Geoff Neal. Gary is the slicker, more educated striker of the two. He sets more traps. I think he's going to feel longer in there, even though he's at a 1-inch reach disadvantage because of the kicks, even though Geoff has the reach. And maybe most importantly of all, as I was just touching on how Gary can be hit and Geoff's left hand is so dangerous, I think Gary's defense is looking much better the last couple fights. And it's possible that it's a mirage because I know the D-Rod fight was only 3 minutes long and the other was against Neil Magny, who he had hobbled pretty early on. So maybe wasn't as much coming back at him as there would have been. But it just feels like he's starting to put it together, be a little more responsible defensively with his movement, similarly to how good he is offensively with it. And I think that his ceiling is higher than the ceiling of Geoff Neal. Now, that doesn't mean he hits it today. He could lose to Geoff Neal here, and eventually, the ceiling is higher. But I'm going to roll with him. I think he can slowly pick Neal apart in there. And Neal keeps a very high guard, which is another point. I think you'll see body shots from Gary, leg kicks, and that the variety will just add up and be enough for him to take the dub. And I'm also very intrigued by the fact that he's training at Shoot-A-Box. Somehow this just completely slipped past me. I didn't even know this. And then I'm turn on Embedded and he's fucking rolling with Charles and training at Shoot-A-Box. So yeah, I kind of like that. I mean, if there's anything missing from Ian Gary's game, it's, and maybe this isn't entirely fair to say, but it's that he's a little bit point fightery. Like you would have loved to see him finish a one-legged Neil Magny, and he couldn't do it. It's just a little bit of that violence is missing that could really put him over the top. You know what I mean? And he may get that from training at that gym because those boys don't fuck around. So I'm intrigued. And I'm going to trust Ian Gary here, and I will take him to win AUD. Okay. Well, we got 3 more? 3 more, yeah. All right. So we move to the first of the 2 Georgians on this card. Big card for Georgia. I didn't even realize that Georgia, the country, by the way, if you're confused by what I'm saying, not the state. I didn't even realize it until like yesterday. I was like, oh shit, Miranda and Topuria, both same card. So this one is Miranda and Henry Cejudo, probably for the next title shot, especially if Miranda wins. Would Henry get it right away? I guess maybe. All right, so who'd they take? Omar's going Miranda by UD. And so is Mike. Mike says, no way I'm taking Cejudo in this matchup. I imagine Merab to be a heavy betting favorite. I'll share that in 1 second. Cejudo has been retired for so long, and to come back and fight a machine like Merab is too much to ask. 30-27 for Merab. All right. So that's Mike's take. And I will give you mine here. Fairly wide, not huge. Merab is minus 220. Henry Cejudo is plus 180. When's the last time Henry Cejudo was plus 180? I don't even think he was that against Aljo, right? Yeah, I don't think so at all. The measurements are 2 inches of height and 4 inches of reach on the Merab side of things. So pretty significant for a guy who I felt like was like almost the same size as Henry in my mind. Like I thought maybe 1 inch and it's 2, but then the 4 inches of reach I didn't really see coming. So that's a nice little chunk on the side of Merab. And yeah, I agree with the boys on this one. We just all went Gary as well. Yeah, so that was our first unanimous one, Gary, and we're unanimous again here. I think this may be the end of Henry Cejudo. It's not that I don't believe he's still good. You know, he looked fine against Aljo despite the loss, but it's been nearly 4 years now since his last win. He's 37 years old, and Merab Fili is a monster. He is one of the most frightening people to watch fight in the game right now. The things he does to guys don't even make sense. He made Petrosyan look like he had nothing to offer. Now, granted, Jose Aldo was able to stand up to Merab in a way that Jan wasn't. And maybe Cejudo's takedown D is more similar to Aldo's than it is to Jan's. But, like, I don't know, because Aldo's is legendary. And Jan's was supposed to be pretty damn good. So, obviously, I know Henry's an Olympic wrestler and all this, but I don't know. I'm interested to see the way he can stand up to Merab's takedowns. But even if he does, I still see this being a smothering. I don't think Cejudo's going to be able to get much off in his striking and be, in and out the way he wants to. I doubt he can land like a one-hitter quitter on Merab. He just doesn't necessarily have that. And Merab will eat shots too. And I don't think he can purely out-wrestle Merab at all. I don't see that at all. I know Merab's not an Olympian like Henry, as I said a second ago. But it's MMA wrestling, and I think he's going to be the one who outworks Henry in this fight. It may not be dominant, it may be a bit ugly, but I think it's just a high-pace, smothering performance from Merab. And I can see Henry being pressed against the cage and just, Merab has a hold of him, he's behind them, wherever he may be, and Henry just looking frustrated more and more as the fight goes on. And I kind of think that's how this thing plays out. So I'll go Merab to win a UD and hopefully get himself a very deserved title shot, but we will see if the UFC actually comes through on that. All right, sip of water before we go to the co-main here. All right, co-main event of the evening. Middleweight division, the former champ Robert Whittaker taking on Paulo Costa. Let's see who the boys got in this one. Omar going Whittaker to win a UD. Mike also going Whittaker to win a UD. Mike says Bobby Knuckles will continue to show why he's the best 185er in the world, not named Israel Adesanya or Pereira. Are we forgetting about the champion, Rodrigues du Plessis, who beat Rob? Anyway, I'll ask Mike about that another day. And he will call out Strickland on the mic. Interesting. Okay. All right. So Whittaker is a pretty significant favorite, despite, obviously getting finished and Costa being a big, scary man. Whittaker is minus 250, and Costa is plus 200. 1 inch of height for Paulo, but 1.5 inches of reach for Bobby Knuckles. And we're making it 3 in a row here where me and the boys are unanimous because I am on Robert Whittaker as well. I do have a little bit of pause considering what we just saw from Rob against Rodrigues du Plessis and knowing that Paulo is a similarly huge and powerful striker. But I think the Rodrigues performance was, A, a bad night for Rob, and B, more so because of the awkward style. And Costa is much more of a straightforward style striker in his movements compared to what Rodrigues is. And we've also seen Whitaker beat other big, strong guys like Cannonier and Vettori. So it's not like that is the problem necessarily. I really think it was just Rodrigues is a unique fighter, as we are seeing more and more every time he fights. But like that Vettori fight was only one fight ago for Rob, and he dominated him. And that's a guy that Costa's lost to for what it's worth. I mean, good fight, but he lost it. Plus, he hasn't fought now in like a year and a half. And in his last fight, he had to work hard to beat a gassed Luke Rockhold. So, I mean, it was a weird one. They were at altitude. They were both kind of gassed. But, point remains. So, barring a sudden fall off from Rob, I just don't feel like Paulo is on his level. Technique for technique, I just think this is going to be all Robert Whitaker. I know I made the same technique for technique point in the DDP fight, but I'm going to make it again here. And I'm going to trust it, and I think Bobby Knuckles gets this done by UD. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the main event. Alexander the Great Volkanovski defending his UFC Featherweight Championship against Ilia Topuria, the man who is undefeated and who has torn through this division and has already anointed himself as the champion on Instagram and everywhere you look, and already has a documentary about how he won the belt and all this. So it should be a great one. Let's see who the boys got. Omar is going with Volkanovski to retain his belt by UD. Mike is going with N-New, Ilia Topuria by UD. He says, I believe it will be, and it should be, Topuria's toughest challenge in his career, but I believe his hand speed and power will make the difference. All right, so they're 1-1. I got to split the difference here. I won't spoil it for you yet. All right, let's dive into it. Betting lines, incredibly close. Alexander Volkanovski is -125. A man who has never lost at featherweight. And Ilia Topuria is +105. Even money practically for a UFC featherweight against Alexander Volkanovski. Seems wild, but I mean, he has looked that good. All right, measurements. 1 inch of height for Ilia, but 2.5 inches of reach for Volk. Yeah, it's a hard one. It's a hard one for sure. Because as good as Topuria is, his only 2 ranked level wins of his career were against Josh Emmett and Bryce Mitchell. And as good as they both are, they're not even on the same planet as Alexander Volkanovski, who is an inarguable all-time great, and a great who is still yet to lose at 145 pounds. But on the flip side of that, both the Emmett win and the Mitchell win were absolute showcases, and in different ways. Against Bryce, Ilia showed you the grappling pedigree, just absolutely ragdolled a guy that no one else had been able to outgrapple to that point or even deal with his wrestling. And then against Emmett, he showed you the boxing. He just controlled every bit of space in that fight, controlled every step, every exchange, dominated Josh completely. So you see that, and it's like, well, who cares who he's fought, because he's clearly unreal and is on this level. So it's just very hard to gauge how all of that matches up with Alexander Volkanovski, just because, as I said, it's such a jump from who he's fought so far. But the talent seems to imply that he should be able to hang here, if not win, as obviously a lot of people think he will. As for Volk, I mean, you guys know at this point, we don't need to talk about how good Volk is everywhere. Yes, he finally took a clear L in his last fight on short notice against Islam. But right before that, he's finishing Yair in 3 and arguably beating Islam, depending on your take on that fight. So it's not like he's fallen off simply because of the one loss. It's tough. But I think I'm still going to take Volk. I think I'm going to say Volk turns him back. If Islam couldn't out grapple Volk, do we really trust that Topuria is going to do it? I know he's dangerous. I know he's a hell of a grappler, but fuck, so is Islam Makhachev. And Volk was sitting there safe, taunting him and punching backwards and everything. So is he getting tapped by Topuria? I mean, I don't know. I know Ortega was close, but even Ortega didn't get it. And Ortega's filthy too. So, we'll see. I mean, maybe Topuria is at a level we don't even realize, but I'm not ready to say without seeing it with my own eyes that he's going to out-grapple Alexander Volkanovski. And standing as good as Ilya is, I think he's going to meet a lot of resistance from Volk, who just has such an incredible understanding of timing and of his own footwork and what shots to throw in what moments in terms of balance and what can land the hardest from certain angles. Volk is a master of this. He has broken guys just simply through, I don't even want to say volume, just through the shots he picks. And Ilya is, a lot the same, but what the point here is that Ilya is now meeting a guy who can match him. He can control space the way that Ilya does. His footwork is as good as Ilya's is. His boxing, his hand speed, his power. Volk is longer. I mean, he's matching a guy. I'm not saying it's all identical, and in some spots I think Volk is better. But as an overall striking package, I think Topuria does not have an advantage for the first time, and I think by virtue of making the fight difficult for Ilya, the fight is going to start to turn because, as I was alluding to in the beginning, Ilya is so unbelievably confident heading into this fight to the point that it's rubbing some people the wrong way. That, if you don't know, as I was saying early on, he's already got that he's 15-0 on his Instagram. He already has that he's the champ on his Instagram. He's been filming a documentary called Road to the Belt about how he won this title. He's been talking about how he's clearly going to win this belt. And then when he wins it, he's not letting any of the contenders fight for it. Not letting Ihor or Ortega, like he's already saying who he will or won't fight and that he only wants super fights and all this. It's, we've seen it before. Obviously, there's been guys who have talked this way. Conor certainly did. But maybe Conor was a little more fun about it because, yeah, I do think Ilya seems to be annoying some people, not everyone, but I see some people are like, what's up with this dude? I'm sure his countrymen in both Georgia and Spain do not care at all and are all about it. So I'm sure it's fun for them. But my point is that I think someone as unbelievably confident as he is rolling into this fight, when he is met with resistance and the avenues where he thinks he is going to blow Volk away, where he's always blown guys away, are not playing out that way. I think you can't help but have it mess with your head a little bit, where you just feel like, well, fuck, this is harder than I'm used to it being by quite a bit. And when things get messy and grimy and guys have to question themselves, and Volk, I'm sure, will have to question himself in this fight too, because Topuria is that good. But when things get that way, just as I said, grimy, dirty fights, guys are in their own heads, questioning what they have left. I think I want to be on the side of Alexander Volkanovski, and I am going to say that he digs this one out, and that he retains his belt by UD. So I will go with Volk. Two of us on Volk. Mike is on Topuria. We'll see if he ends up looking very smart picking the new champ. But I'm going to go Volk by UD. So that is that. If you stuck with me, I appreciate it. As I said in the beginning, first time we've had to do a one-man episode here. It was fun. It feels weird to do. I'm so used to going back and forth with the guys, but it was cool. I hope you guys enjoyed it, got something out of it. Definitely leave comments, takes on anything I said here, disagreements, agreements, fight picks, bets you like, as I said, anything. Would love to go back and forth with you guys. Thank you for listening. Normal pay-per-view time this weekend, 10 o'clock pay-per-view, 8 o'clock prelims. I think it's, what would it be, 6:30 for the early prelims? Or maybe it's only 12 fights, so maybe 7. And then, yeah, we will be back next week. Hopefully all three of us will be back next week. I know Mike's almost better from being sick, and I think scheduling wise, we're all straight next week. So we should see you back here next week for a normal show. But that is it. So thank you. We'll see you next week. Enjoy the fights. Peace.